I am being fascinated by a piece of thought, and I kind of want to flesh it out, and I want to go through it. And it's dealing with UK politics. Initially, it wasn't even dealing with UK. It was dealing with what's taking place in Chicago with Donald Trump basically sending troops into Chicago. But in trying to explain that, this happened. And I kind of want to explore this because at least I'm fascinated by it, and maybe there might be 100 other people who are also. Is there anything that could happen to you in your outside world where your life would matter less? Meaning something where you say, my life, I'm willing to give my life for X. Because whatever X is, X matters that much more than even how precious my life is. Or even for that matter, life and limb. Maybe the protests. If Donald Trump comes out after election day where he loses monstrously and he just says, yeah, I'm not going anywhere, would your life matter more? Or would your life matter less? Are you going to be on the streets saying, whoa, this is a breach of something, this is horrendous, where if indeed he gets his goons to be able to go out and try to beat down protesters, do you still go out? Are you like those moms that are in Portland that go out despite the fact that they're being pepper sprayed and beat, et cetera, et cetera? A lot of us don't necessarily have to deal with that on necessarily a day-to-day basis. But from the standpoint of our society, we do get those questions, and we do have to deal with that stuff. Is there anything that would matter more than whatever X is? Let's say X is whether you have to deal with a conservative government. Maybe X is Donald Trump winning presidency, where you just have to accept whatever comes after Donald Trump wins that election because of something that you were pushing for. What matters more than X? Now, I'm fascinated by that. And I want to explore that looking at Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn and the race that they were running and the themes that were taking place and how that pertains to now, because it does. Like UK politics, I swear, man, if you're an American, you got to pay attention to UK politics because I like to say that we're their darker brother. But the politics is so closely enough aligned where you make sense and understand what's going on. But you understand it in somewhat a different way than they do. They haven't gotten to the levels to which you've gotten yet in regards to how far they move into the right. And so they don't see it. You do, because you're living in a country that has moved that far to the right. It gives you a different perspective and a different context in the way that you look at your own politics. The election between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, I am going to basically make the argument that Boris Johnson is going to sell off the NHS. Boris Johnson is going to have you guys eating chlorinated chickens. And Boris Johnson is going to sell your country up and have it to be picked to the bone by U.S. companies. Now, his problem is that whatever trade deal he's going to try to get with the UK, or with the EU, he needs to potentially leverage the relationship with the United States to balance that off. And since it doesn't look like he may even get a trade deal with the EU, a weakened UK that does not have the huge, magnificent body of the EU stomping for it is now going to be served up to companies that are salivating. God knows I'm telling you, they are salivating to get their hands on your country. And Boris Johnson will be the guy to do it. In part, he's a conservative. He doesn't necessarily buy into this stuff of the NHS in and of itself. Kind of like the people here, the conservatives in this country that don't believe in a postal service. And so they're serving up, trying to destroy the postal service over generation after successive generation. And you didn't have a choice. Or did you? Now, my argument is you didn't have a choice. And I know that sounds fucked up, but that's true. This is one of those things where it's like, if you want to change something, and man, this is a horrible example, but the root of it is right. You want to change how the United States operates in the 60s. And then you have a racist, fascistly racist, governmental structure that is basically attacked and oriented to be against African Americans. How do you change that? Now, if you're black, you can go along to get along. But that's basically go along to get along with something that is unmoral, immoral to the core, especially from the standpoint of any level of social justice, or good trouble, sit-ins, provocation in regards to pushing the state, in regards to making sure that everybody else is annoyed by our issue, because you guys are ignoring our issue. We need to make sure that we suffer together. That, yes, we're going to bug the shit out of you because the social injustice is eating at us to the core. We need to deal with this issue. And successive waves and waves of pushing and pushing at the state in order to get these things to change. Finally getting a certain political force to get something done by that. The consequence, though, is beatings, attacks, tear gas, killings that go on for year after year after year after year. Now, the catch becomes, hey, do you go along to get along or accept the consequences of those killings and everything else in order to try to change the system itself? Well, clearly, the answer to that was you accept the consequences of the killings and everything else. It's not that you love it. It's not that it's great. It's not that the people who were living during that time love the fact that the cops were beating the shit out of people, or that those people enjoy being beaten by those cops. None of that stuff was great. None of that stuff was wanted. But it was a consequence. And not just a consequence, a cost that needed to be paid in order to make up the deficit in regards to social justice. That's true for other things that may not necessarily be that drastic. If you are living in the UK and a vote is going on between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, and the issue that is grappled with, your country has grappled with for 3 years. Only thing that's on the news, or the main thing that's on the news, Brexit. What are you going to do about Brexit? You're ripping us away in regards to our relationship with the European Union. What is that going to look like? How are we going to be by ourselves, Britain, solitary, amongst nations? And one side says, we're going to listen to the referendum. The public says this. This is indeed a democracy, unless we, say we are. The longest running democracy, or something to that effect, parliament. And the public says we need to leave. And conservatives says, great, we'll leave. We're going to listen to the referendum. Labor says, great, we'll leave. We'll listen to the referendum. It is impossible, utterly impossible, for any political party that calls themselves living in a democracy that gets a referendum from the public itself. What do you want? And the public, and the largest vote share that country has ever had, says, leave. And a group says, fuck the public. Literally, Tony Blair is like, I don't care what the public says there. That's mind-blowing. Conservative says, we believe in freedom and democracy. Labor initially says, we believe in that, weakly so. Because we still want to have some kind of relationship, because we realize that this is going to, this is not going to look all like, well, the public might have wanted this, but this is going to suck trying to implement. But at the very least, they still said, yeah, we'll back it. Jeremy Corbyn, who is a Brexiteer before Brexit ever came up as an issue, meaning the guy who does not fully in his heart believe in Brexit at all, who would agree with Boris Johnson, yeah, we need to get the fuck out of here. This is an undemocratic institution. Was in the Tony Benn school of this stuff, of basically, look, we should not tether ourselves to the European Union in this way. This is a trading relationship, and let's deal with that part. But nah, not these political entanglements, especially when we don't have sovereignty in this issue. And he gets bent to form, bent into a pretzel to basically say, okay, I think we should, renegotiate. But what does that mean, Jeremy? You gonna leave? You're gonna go? I think we should renegotiate. We should send people who don't believe in Brexit to negotiate a new Brexit deal. And then when we get that new Brexit deal, we will hold it up to a vote, and we will let the public vote again, yay or nay. And I will just go with that. And I would abstain from really getting involved in the details of that. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? If I am Boris Johnson, I would do exactly what Boris Johnson did, because it's good politics. Boris Johnson said, I, Bojo, believe in freedom and democracy. That's me, Mr. Freedom and Democracy. You voted to leave. I am going to take you out of it. I'm going to take you out of here. Now, the catch here is Jeremy Corbyn matched up extremely well with Theresa May. Extremely well. He matches up horribly with Boris Johnson. You could see it from day one. Boris Johnson ridiculed him and attacked him. And the power dynamic between the two looked like a vigorous alpha male just bashing down a bookered guy. A guy who's, in the books. The thing here is, just because it looked that way didn't necessarily mean Jeremy Corbyn wasn't necessarily right in regards to the policy stuff. It's just on this issue he was wrong. And the catch is, just like what was taking place in the United States with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders won all the policy arguments. That didn't matter. The issue was electability, one thing. And in the UK, that issue was Brexit. And if Boris Johnson can stand in that dispatch box and ridicule him over and over and over again, and be correct in his ridicule, basically saying, I am going to leave the European Union. I'm leaving. We're going. We're out. That's my position. You give me the numbers, I'm going to leave. Period. Sits down. Now, when Jeremy Corbyn gets up, he can't say that. Jeremy Corbyn is going to say, yes, we're going to honor the referendum, but what we're going to do is he explains this complicated stuff, and it's like, wait. You're going to renegotiate a new deal? Okay. Well, and then you're going to put it back up for another vote? But we voted to leave. We've already voted on this. Why are we voting for this again? I mean, why are you going through this maneuver? Are you going to stay or go? He can't say either. And it looks weak. And not just weak, it looks cowardly in regards to the way. And look, I am a Jeremy Corbyn fan. But I'm telling you, I said this during the election. It looked weak. It looked very weak. It looked indecisive. And it looked like you can't give a clear answer on your intentions. If you are indeed supposed to be the prime minister, you are indeed supposed to be the leader of that stuff. And yeah, it's okay to be working with other people, fair enough. But at the end of the day, you're the PM. It's your lead. It looked bad. So the public now is being asked a monstrous choice. Jeremy Corbyn comes out and says the UK is going to be up for sale. Now, that's a no shit. He says the Tories are going to serve the NHS up. And here are their plans. Now, to me, again, this is a no shit. If the United States is going to make a deal with the UK, yeah, the NHS is going to be up for sale. Donald Trump is going to have specific interest in it because of the amount of money that people contribute to our campaigners. It may not be this way in the UK, but in our country, massive amounts, billions, go into presidential campaigns. Those billions go into those campaigns because those people want the ear of the president on issues like this pertaining to issues like that, meaning the NHS. That means that any deal that Trump works out with the UK, the NHS is a prime issue because it's a public service. And as a public service, they're going to want access. But what's the public to do, right? And this is kind of my point. It's a monstrous choice. Basically, do you allow Labor to flagrantly ignore the referendum? Do you basically say, look, Democratic vote mattered less in the situation because they had us over a barrel for the NHS? Or do you say, all right, yeah, I understand what the referendum was, but this is worse, in which case we kind of not give it to Bojo? I'm telling you, the public looked at that and said, no, this was a referendum. We chose to do this. We want to deal with this issue. Brexit was the issue. Put this issue to bed. Let's leave it. Let's get on with it. Let's go. And there was no political situation outside of the conservatives that gives them that choice. So then they accept almost the potential loss of the NHS as a consequence of that. That's a horrible choice. Like, in some degree, that's kind of the choice that the U.S. is being asked to make in regards to Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Basically, they get you over a barrel, right? This is the you have nowhere else to go argument. This country agreed that Medicare for all was the best healthcare plan. It agreed that Sanders had the best environmental policy. It agreed that Sanders had the best environment, healthcare. It was something else that was more trustworthy, more honest. All of those things. They agreed, yes, Sanders is our guy. We like that. That's good. But then they say, who do you think has a better chance of beating Trump? And they say, Joe Biden. That means that they didn't care what Joe Biden's policy was. They just said, keep the monster at bay. And in a time frame where you have like 40 million people out of a job, you have I think they say like 20 million people without health care, just losing it from the COVID thing. You have, what was the other thing? 140,000 people that are dead from something that in no way should have killed 140,000 people. And you have cases that are spiking to the point where morgues are overfilling in Arizona and Texas. Florida is putting over numbers that are just phenomenal. You're back up to over 1,000 dead each day. And when FDR was dealing with only one of those issues, meaning the employment thing, he acted like we were being fucking invaded. I mean, FDR put through Social Security, he pushed through employment laws, he pushed through all of these things just within the first 100 days. And he pressed on later for other issues. I guess I'm making the point that FDR behaved and acted as if this is an emergency and we need to act as such in order to deal with this emergency. And all powers at my discretion will be used to do such. Joe Biden is still pushing for the drug war. Like, he's like, it's hard to get across how out of touch this man who can barely speak and articulate words is at this moment. And the Democrats know basically they have you over a barrel. Again, just like with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. What the difference in this time is Donald Trump royally fucked up. And Donald Trump is putting troops on the streets of of states that don't want him in their state. Like, it's hard to get across how bizarre that is. All of this, however, boils down to you have nowhere else to go. And the catch with the you have nowhere else to go has been taken over the last 40 years. Whether you realize this or not, the reason that Donald Trump is sitting in that office right now is for that very specific argument. Year after year after year, you completely give away any notion of accountability and accept this notion that blue no matter who, which basically lulls you into this idea that it doesn't really matter what the Democrat is, doesn't really matter what they think. Whatever the Democrat is, it's relative entirely to whatever the Republican is, and just incrementally less worse. Which allows you to go further and further and further into worseness, accepting that nonsense. And Republicans get more monstrous as you go along in that process. And any notion of accountability and holding the Democrat to account for particular policies that you want, ideas that you want expressed, off the table. That means that you settle for Joe Biden. The weird part about this is that the Joe Bidens of the world are the ones that lose. Hillary Clinton lost. Al Gore lost. John Kerry lost. Obama, the radical, believe it or not, the one that they thought was the progressive, believe it or not, because he was screaming hope and change, black man, Muslim name, that's the guy that won. He had a message. It was an affirmative message of the case. He had people riled up and energized. Those people were willing to go out, knock on doors, send them tons of cash. It was the radical that won. I'm making the point that the public has a weird, lull sense of what a Democrat is, just because the majority of Democrats look and smell like Joe Biden. But the reality of it is the public has a very short memory and is not necessarily tethered to reality of what those things are. And so they put up what they know and what the media tells them is right. This guy smells like a Democrat. He stinks like one. So this is the guy. And Bernie Sanders doesn't stink like a Democrat. He seems like something else. This kind of gets across this notion that I keep making that there are no two parties. There's just one party that is a slight gradient between the two. And the media has just basically propagandized people into thinking that those are two separate things. How are they two separate things when their understanding and framing of the world is entirely the same? Just with a small modicum of difference. The way they treated Sanders should have got that across. He had a different idea of the world, at the very least, a further gradient that would not necessarily be considered to be the same thing. Look, my basic point is this. When you push this notion of blue no matter who, you remove any notion of accountability from the political process. Those people can do anything in that office and just try to explain it away as, hey, you got to vote the Democrat, blue no matter who. The Republicans are horrible. They're monsters. But what does that mean if you want something? Meaning you have the idea that politics is not just about having a placeholder, but actually having somebody to affirmatively push for a particular thing. You understand that if you're putting somebody in that office, if you're voting for somebody in that office that is not going to be willing to do those things, you basically affirm that they will never do those things. It's basically, you need to make them know that they can lose. It depends on what you have at your disposal. If you can round up a large number of people to do X, fair enough. If the only thing you have is a brick, then you use a brick. You hit yourself with the brick. Because ultimately you have to understand that you're perpetuating a system where you don't ever get those things accomplished out of fear, where you have this notion that, oh God, the monster is going to eat us. The monster is already in office. You did what you wanted to do. You followed that path of blue no matter who for the last 40 years, and this is where it got you. The truth of it is, many of the people, the majority of the people that don't vote are people of color and are people who are making under $30,000. Because what those people realize is that the minimalist difference between the two parties doesn't change anything materially for them. The energy that they put into the voting process doesn't change anything for them. And because it doesn't change anything for them, they have no reason to participate in the process. Most Democrats who are on the Kool-Aid doesn't understand that. Many of those people, however, are not necessarily in situations where they are in deep lack. And so that particular party works in their interests. Not everyone is like that. There are a lot of people who want to actually get things done. And it behooves those people who want to get things done to stand under the banner of policy and let them lose. That's not your fault that they lost. You have a very clear idea of what you want. The overwhelming majority of the public wants it. Let's say Medicare for all, for example. If the Democratic Party decides to pursue a candidate or a course that doesn't include Medicare for all, they are being anti-democratic. That's on them. They make that choice. Your choice is, I am with the majority of the public that wants X. That's not on you anymore. That's on them. They're making a choice as a party to not support a policy that the overwhelming majority of the public supports. And if they are backing some kind of policy that the overwhelming majority of the public doesn't support, then who are they representing? It's not us. Why do you support that? Now, consequence, just like in the UK, Trump wins. That's a monstrous consequence. But the question becomes, how do you ever change that, right? If you get a situation where the next one, Ted Cruz, is going to be against any random Democrat. Let's say it's let's say it's Joe Manchin. Ted Cruz versus Joe Manchin. Who do you vote for? Yeah, that's a monstrous choice. Tom Cotton and Hillary Clinton. Barely sane, but running in the Democratic Party nonetheless. Who do you vote for? I would imagine most Democrats would say, hey, Hillary Clinton, blue no matter who. That's not a problem. You don't see how that gets a problem and how it gets worse year after year after year because you've allowed no accountability to get so monstrous that it just worms its way forward, where as the Republican get worse, the Democratic can also get worse. that has to stop somewhere. The question becomes, where does that stop? And what does the country look like when it does? I'll leave this here. I'm rambling. Like, share, subscribe. Fuck Google. Sup, brother? What's up? What's happening? Fuck Google. Let's see. Who is this? Gracious Allen. Pressed. I don't know what Pressed is. Fuck Google smashed. I love that. Love that. Do that. It's late. It's Merlin. You can get all the gummies you want. Lizzie Rosario also had the longest recovery because he sucked so bad at job creation. That's funny. Oz Wills. When you said a corporate issuing currency, it will indicate at the end of the nation state and those corporations internalized responsibility for employees' dependents is done. If I understand that right, yeah, but our corporations, the only interest is cash. The other stuff is, secondary. The other stuff is secondary. But I feel you. We get into these conversations on fault lines. It's always really interesting, good talk. One of the conversations we had recently was on foreign policy. And I think it was Stephen Lindman. Loves Stephen Lindman. And he was making this argument basically like, look, they're not a threat to us. Like he's saying China, Russia, these countries, they're not a threat to us. In fact, we're making them more of a threat to us just because of the way we're acting on this stuff. But, what we talk about is untethered from reality. And I was trying to make the point to him like, yeah, I get that. And when I was growing up and when I first started studying politics, I used to say the same thing. Like, wow, man, this is really fucked up. I can't believe that we're doing that. Then I realized, my thinking is wrong. My thinking is wrong. It's not that if you're having an honest talk with one, or let's say a right winger, and you let's say John Bolton, let's say you can have an honest talk with John Bolton, 3 a.m. he's sauced, wasted off his ass, and you find that maybe he's affable in person. He's not, from what I hear, he's not. He's an asshole. But maybe when he's sauced, he's just kind of thick. And you said, dude, you realize that these countries are not threats to us. They're not trying to attack us. They're not on our borders or anything else. He would probably say, yeah, I know that. And you're probably, well, what's the fuck? How are you creating this much havoc around the world? And he would say, look, all of your morality and ethics and stuff, they don't matter. None of it's real. Not only is none of it's real, everything's permitted. Because everything is permitted, you live in a world that is full of vampires and vultures and monsters. Because at the end of the day, anything and everything can happen, and there is no God that stops it from doing so. And he's trying to impress upon you how terrifying that reality is, of being in a situation where there is nothing to protect you but you, your wits, and what you have at your disposal to do so. It's a jungle, everybody has their club, and everybody can go for what they want. And what people do is aggregate into their tribes, and in using their tribe to suppress and hold back the other tribes to ensure that in this space, that there is nothing that can protect you but you, that you control. Meaning, you're in a reality space where you need to assert control and dominance. And I was just so happy to be born as a quirk of nature into a body, into a country where I could get political clout to exert that particular opinion across the globe. Now, you saying, but they're not a threat to us, doesn't matter one iota. It has nothing to do with it. Whether they're a threat is irrelevant. The point is we need to assert and dominate. And as long as we can assert and dominate, we control. We get to say what goes. The whole point is we need to have full discretion and ability to do whatever we want. It's control. Now, that has to understand to some degree some level of limits, right? Just because you don't want to go as far where your country can't compensate. But where that point is, where your country can't compensate is, it's a flexible thing. Subjective, depending upon the people you're on. Right wingers will think that's more brinksmanship. We could push it that much more harder. We can murder Soleimani. They can't do anything about it. And whatever they do is not going to be so bad where it starts a war, where we can exterminate them. So you get that type of stuff. But the framing is basically, there are no rules in this stuff. You use your military, economic might, whatever leverage that you have at your disposal. And that depends on the space to which you operate, whether it's financial, whether it's economic, whether it's military, diplomatic, media, all of those things. You have all sorts of stuff that you can do to fuck with people and countries. Yeah, it's not about right or wrong. Right or wrong doesn't apply. It's control. And you can't say that, wow, that's monstrous, because there's no God to give a yay or nay on it. It's just my point of view in regards to what I think the world should be. The only way you could say he's right or wrong is if you could point to objective things in reality to say that it contradicts with what you're saying here. But from the standpoint of a point of view, it just is what it is, what it is. It's his. You have a community of people who may disagree with it, but that's just a community of people who also have individuated points of view who just disagrees. There's no anything to put a cosmic stamp of approval on it. And, that's a terrifying thing. It's terrifying in the point that he exists, which means that there may be other people like him that exist elsewhere, which is monstrous in and of itself. He creates his own monsters in somewhat of a weird way. But there's more of him. It's not just John Bolton. John Bolton is not just one guy. There's all sorts of people with points of view like that. And that is perfectly willing to leverage the military and the arm of that weight of that arm in that way to go after other nations. You have people in office who are willing to use the economic and the media. The media is more than willing to use whatever comes out from the standpoint of the federal government to attack people for international. It's just the way our world operates. It's not this, international law. That's more of a mask. That's not reality per se. All right, I'll leave this here. Like, share, and subscribe. Think so.